Look forward to that on the 15th, 2 weeks from today. That'll also be the Reverend Jacob Singleton's first Sunday with us. Looking forward to him being with us. They are in town. They are moved in. So you'll be seeing him and wife Ashley and daughter Addison around in the coming weeks. Look forward to y'all meeting them. Now, it's hard to believe that 23 years ago, this past Friday, 23 years ago, the world lost Fred Rogers. Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. How many of y'all grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, or had your kids watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or Daniel Tiger, anything affiliate? Yeah, look at y'all. There it is. There it is. He was one of the all-time great human beings. And as I love to brag about, he was a Presbyterian minister. And he was a graduate of good old Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, my recent alma mater. This man was a pioneer. He was a pioneer not only in terms of children's television, but he also was a pioneer in the way that he utilized mass media to fulfill his calling as a pastor. And he was also a very, very talented musician. That man could play the piano. And he wrote some music, didn't he? I mean, I could start the phrase, it's a... There it is. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Won't you be my neighbor? Yes. If you don't know who Fred Rogers was, or if you never watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, we're going to have a chat after worship. But he was also, let me say this, he was also incredibly brave. The year was 1969. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood had been on the air for only 1 year. And the nation was in the throes of the civil rights movement. In fact, just a year prior to this particular episode, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated, and to say the least, things were tense. Now, the safe play would have been to keep everything in the middle of the road. The safe play would have been to avoid the topic altogether, especially considering that this was a children's television show. But Fred Rogers wasn't interested in safety, nor was he interested in conventionality. He was most interested in being faithful. And so on May the 9th, 1969, Fred Rogers invited Officer Clemens to cool his feet in a small plastic wading pool because it was a hot day in the neighborhood that day. And the officer, he was out in his officer uniform, working up a sweat. He came to see Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers said, "Well, come here, Officer Clemens. I would be happy to let you cool your feet in this pool." The thing is, Officer Clemens was black. And black people and white people did not often share pools together in that time. In fact, it was quite frowned upon. And initially, Officer Clemens balked at the idea. Oh, no, Mr. Rogers, I can't do that. I don't have a towel for my feet. And Mr. Rogers didn't hesitate. He said, well, you can use mine. And so right there on Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, you had a towel, you had a basin of water, and Fred Rogers allowed him to use his towel to dry his feet. "24 years later, the two reenacted that episode on another showing of Mr. Rogers, 1993. Same situation. Officer Clemens puts his feet in the pool. Mr. Rogers lets him use his towel, but this time, Mr. Rogers dries his feet and washes his feet. It was a powerful image. This man, Officer Clemens, of course, as I said, he was black, but the actor who played him was gay. And this was life-changing and life-giving for him. On a children's television show, no less. By a pool of water. Rewind a couple thousand years to a different neighborhood, and the scene was no less scandalous. Another pool of water, this time actually a well of water. And the well was significant. Wells were very significant in those days. The reason they were significant is because wells were where people, when they would have heard this story, they would have immediately associated a well. Okay, wells are where things happen, where certain things happen. This is where ancestors like Abraham and Jacob, wells like this very one, were where they met their spouses. Jacob met his wife at a well. Abraham met his wife at a well. And so for a Jew to have heard that Jesus was meeting a woman at the well would have immediately conjured up some images. But it wasn't just any woman at the well. First of all, of course, she didn't have a name. But the other thing about her is that she was a Samaritan woman. Now, I know I've said this in worship before, but I'll say it again. Samaritans and Jews, no. They had a long and sordid history where they did not intermingle. This whole situation that Jesus met a Samaritan woman at the well would have raised some eyebrows. In fact, it would have encapsulated the very meaning of the word taboo. But notice what happens here. She doesn't come to his turf. He goes to hers. It says that he went to a Samaritan city called Sychar. Jesus went there by his own volition, his own choice to go there. It was as if he was trying to make a point, which is what he did with that woman. Now, there is so much. I mean, we just read 25 verses. And the thing about John is John's gospel is dense. It is thick with meaning. There is a lot going on in John's gospel. There is no way that I could possibly hit everything that's going on in this particular story within one sermon. It would take an hour, and y'all think I preach long enough as it is. So I just want to say this for the purposes today. I want to hammer home one particular aspect of this reading. You may have noticed at the top of the bulletin each week we have what are called centering words. Sometimes it's a prayer, sometimes a quote, sometimes it's a poem. But today, it's a quote from a theologian. And it informs what I want to say to y'all today. Here Jesus says, "Only I am," but in the context he means I'm the Messiah. This is the central truth of the Gospel of John. Here's a key point, and it is the only time that Jesus reveals this truth to another person. It is the only time in John where he says exactly who he is. And he says it to a Samaritan and to a woman. And that is deeply significant not only to John's first century audience, but also to anyone who seeks to understand the gospel. The gospel truth of Jesus' life is that he brings a new way of life, a way that results in all people, women and men, Samaritans and Jews, outsiders and insiders, worshiping in spirit and in truth. He could have made this claim about who he was to anybody. He could have said it to his disciples. He could have said it to Nicodemus. He could have said it to the Pharisees. He could have said it to the people who accused him later on in his life. There were so many other times where Jesus could have been quite explicit in saying, you know what, I am the Christ. And yet he says it to exactly one person in this gospel, and it is to a Samaritan woman. A so-called enemy, a so-called untouchable, a foreigner. And it's really important because it illustrates the nature and the direction of this particular gospel and the course of the direction that Jesus' ministry was to take in this gospel. His was a ministry that was not only meant for the insider, his was a ministry that was not only meant for the establishment, his was not only a ministry that was directed towards Pharisees, people in the center like Nicodemus. His was a ministry and a mission that was grounded in a love that met people on the edges. Went to where they were. Didn't ask them to come to him. Went to where they were. So he could tell them who he was. Went to where they were. Be it a Samaritan woman, or a black gay man in a pool, or a person struggling with mental health challenges, or a woman who walks the streets asking for a bowl of soup, or a family who cannot afford to send their baby to be in the care of somebody so they can go to work, or a person with brown-colored skin looking for a job so they can support their family. His was a love that lived on the edges with the people who were struggling, yearning for living water to quench their parched, dried out souls. That's where he went, y'all. And where the rubber meets the road is if we are really the church of Jesus Christ, and if we are really to follow Jesus Christ, then that means we have to follow him to the edges. That means we have to follow him to find the Samaritan woman on her ground and not on ours, on her turf and not on ours, and not expect or anticipate that she will necessarily come to us. Because here's the thing, the church just doesn't so happen to have God's mission. Rather, God's mission just so happens to have a church meeting people at the wells of misfortune and desperation and sharing with them exactly and precisely and explicitly who Christ is. For so many years, churches have expected people to come to us. That's not the case anymore. And I don't think it was ever meant to be the case. That's why Fred Rogers got on a TV screen and met people in their homes. It may not be conventional, but it is faithful. And chances are, it may require some bravery on our part to do it. But what I can say is that if the church, capital C, manages to do that kind of work, then I am willing to bet that the old song will prove true. Because when that happens, it will be a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Because we will be saying to the woman at the well, won't you be? Won't you be? Please, won't you be my neighbor?